right, the clock has changed to 2:45, and that's my cue to get started. Good afternoon. How's everybody? Good. Can you hear me in the back? Perfect. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking your time to be here today. I'm Susan Lacotte, and I'm part-time faculty. I've been on board about 5 years and just absolutely love what I do, and I'm very honored and privileged to be able to stand in front of you today and share a little bit of what I know and what was passed along to me about updating notes and helping your students learn strategies and tactics for borrowing and sharing notes to create engagement. So if we'll switch slides, thank you. So what we're going to do first things first, is amongst this group, and just like in a classroom, I'd like for you all in 10 seconds to define one person as your session scribe. And that session scribe will take copious notes about everything that's presented here in the next 22 minutes. Okay? And Keith is pointing to somebody. All right. So, all right, session scribe. Next we need a highlight scribe. A highlight scribe's role is to only jot down those key messaging points in these next 22 minutes. Just the key messaging points. We need just one person. All right, everybody's pointing to you. Sir, I don't know your name, but you're it. You're Barry the highlight scribe. Fantastic. And the rest of you sitting here are all note takers. You will simulate being a student in a classroom. So you're all going to take notes just as a student would in your classroom. Next slide. Why are we sharing notes? And why are we even encouraging our students to share notes? Well, in the text, The Essential Guide to Becoming a Master Student, author Dave Ellis explained how students can collaborate productively. That contact with other students, making personal contact with at least one other student, especially in classes that are online, and I know we have a lot of those, as well as hybrid classes, helps them to share that, have that free exchange of information, share ideas and thoughts. They can quiz each other and they can critique papers. One of the things I do in my class is have them proofread. It's business communications, so they proofread each other's work, and it helps them become a better writer and a better proofreader. Sharing notes also encourages students to do this early on. It helps them to have a more dynamic, enriching experience. It creates that engagement we're looking for. Oftentimes when a student is not feeling engaged, they check out. They check out mentally, and then sometimes they withdraw from college. Rather than simply sharing notes, and I know my high schooler does this with her friends, they'll be like, hey, can you text me your notes, or what did I miss? And it's like they're not really learning. They're just passing paper like we did when we were in school, right? But having that personal contact allows them to create a richer environment to have a conversation. And that's what we're trying to encourage, and we need to share that and communicate that with our students in the classroom. So the study habits that the students can utilize in order to get more out of sharing their notes with their classmates is to compare notes. And you're going to see at the end we're going to do just that. We're going to compare your notes. It's just like when you've seen on TV, you know, they'll have a mock robbery, or somebody comes into a room and everybody ends up seeing something different with an incident. Your memory recall is different, and it's no different than comparing notes. You can take a mock test and share results. So you can pair students up or put them in groups of 4, depending on how big your class is, and have them test each other, quiz each other, create a sample test. You can take a test under condition. It can be a timed test, it can be a reasoning test, it could be a fill-in-the-blank type of test, and really understand what it is they're extracting and how they're extracting that content, and then how they're digesting it and relaying it back to their peers. And again, practice testing each other. It's a great way to learn something. We're all picking up something different. Next slide. So why do we want to do this? Students aren't asking questions. Boy, oh boy, I have had semesters where my students are crickets. And it's like pulling teeth trying to get them to engage and to ask those questions. You know that the feedback is not coming naturally during your class. If you're teaching online or if it's an in-person class, they're just not saying anything. So in an instructor's mind, it may be, they must be getting it. But really, they're not quite sure what they're supposed to be note-taking on. There's so much content. My course textbook is pretty meaty. It's 400 and some pages. And I always say to the students, there's no way you could read and digest everything. That's why you need to just extract the highlights and the features, even though the book references those in various ways. Pull out the points that we talk about in class. Students don't understand what they're doing. In attentiveness, they may be in listen-only mode, they may be just receiving information and not engaging. And more importantly, and studies have shown, they don't know why this is important. They know they're taking the class, they're going toward a degree goal. It may be of topical interest, content-wise, but why is it important to know it and understand it? It's that theory of why am I here? And so that is why we have them write those notes and really, further digest the content. Per performance is a great indicator, and your feedback as an instructor through low test or quiz scores of how are they doing, certainly, but how are their notes helping them or not helping them? Many semesters ago, I would see this trend and pattern in the testing and quizzing where it's like, gosh, it's only one chapter, maybe it's too much. And so I'd break that chapter up and it still wasn't enough. And then I realized there's just a lot. They don't know what the highlights of each chapter is and within that chapter of those subtopics. So we really have to help them better understand what to extract. And then of course your instructor review and course assessment is a great indicator. We all get that student feedback sheet. They fill those out at the end of the semester. You get to read those shortly thereafter, after your dean takes a review of those. And that'll give you a better idea of what you can do to be a better educator. And I always look at those and say, if somebody's saying, I don't get it, then I need to make sure that I can find ways, strategies and tactics to help them understand better. Interestingly enough, I like this second paragraph, the study from 20 years ago, when computer notes would have been odd. They tested college students to see if taking notes supported the retention of factual knowledge, and it did. The note-taking group scored better than a group who took no notes during the lecture, but later they wrote essays about what they learned. The note-taking group also outscored a control group who reviewed the material but did no writing at all. And in brief, if we write it down, we're more apt to recall it. Next slide. So why incorporate that note sharing? And we just talked about the computer, but is that the end-all be-all? Well, my brain is going on fast forward and my fingers can type a whole lot faster than that as well. But research has shown that note-taking is not supposed to be easy by the long form. When we are writing it out, we have a greater ability to retain that information than if we're just typing it. It's more important that the learner actively engages in learning by listening to what the speaker is saying and including that in their notes, not merely receiving the information and typing it. Although, sorry, wrong bullet point, third one. Laptops can negatively affect performance on education assessments or even when the computer is used for its intended function of easier note-taking. So it's that catch-22 in my classes. I say, no electronic devices and everything off their person. So they're forced to write, if at all. I always encourage them to take the notes, but then there's no way that they can have that laptop open and then easily get distracted, or an IM comes in and then they're back to listening and then they may have missed something. So we do laptops down. Despite the popularity, laptops may be doing more harm than good in the classroom, and just for that reason. It's a distraction. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Even when I think I'm fully focused, if my phone bings or, like I say, an email comes in on my computer, I navigate right to it. So our students are no different. We need to help them stay on track. In short, students ought to shut the laptops and write their notes out. Next slide. All right, so there are a few good methods that we can help students adopt for note sharing. One is the pause procedure, one is called focal point, and one is a class scribe. And we'll go into a little bit of detail. Next slide. So note sharing, the pause procedure. This is a technique in which you, the instructor, makes use of strategic pauses to provide students with time during classroom to update, compare, and share notes. So take a break for 2 or 3 minutes and allow the students to compare the notes. We're going to do that right now. So take a break. We're not going to do 2 or 3 minutes because we're tight on time, but let's take about a minute. And connect with those around you and share your notes. Discuss, rework your notes in pairs. Clarify what you feel has been the highlights of the session so far. Are there any key points? Are there any questions? Did you have a problem understanding anything that's already been presented? Is there one key idea or main idea that's jumping out at you, but maybe not the person you're chatting with? So ideally, in your classroom, we'll come back to center here. Ideally, in your classroom, you're going to take a break every 15 minutes or so, especially if you have a long class. My class runs 6:30 until 9:10. If you have a 1-hour class, maybe you'll do that at the 20-minute mark. But if you have a pretty long class, you want to take a break, not just your stop, stretch, and rest break, but you want to take an update notes break for about 2 minutes and let them talk. Let them share their notes, let them compare some ideas. So what do you do after that pause? It's what your students are going to do during that pause time and thereafter that makes a difference. They can use this time to summarize the information in a written format. They can write paragraphs or sentences for a little more clarity. They can find those main points or create a graphical representation. I'm a doodler, so I always have picture symbols or notes in the margin. There's bubbles around things. That's the way I learn and retain. Maybe my neighbor's not like that, but maybe they'll pick something up or vice versa by what struck me. The students in pairs will help them better recall the facts and clarify any misconceptions and filling in facts that are left out. Again, we go with the scene where somebody comes into a room and everybody sees something different when they walk out. Did he have a bow tie or a regular tie, or was it a blue shirt or a teal shirt? Everybody's seeing something different, and everybody's hearing differently as well. We all receive that information differently. You can frame questions. You can help guide students on how to best update their notes as well. Once they get into the hang of this, and if you're going to be doing this during every class session, it will become easier and easier. And you can also make a game of it. You can have a crossword puzzle. You could do a little quiz on your update notes, whatever works for you. But it creates that engagement that we're not silos in our learning, but rather collaborative learners. Next slide. Another method that I started incorporating was called focal point. So as part of the weekly chapter homework, I found this to be very, very beneficial. Students are required to submit a focal point worksheet. I put the template on Blackboard, they download it every week, fill it in, and there's 4 questions. What did you discover most interesting in this chapter and why? Question 2, what topic in this chapter would you like further clarity? 3, provide an example how you currently use or may potentially use something from this chapter in your work. And finally, if you had to extract 1 point from the chapter as the most beneficial, what would it be and why? What I have found with this is 2 things in particular. 1, the textbook doesn't always deliver content across the board to all students in a way they all can remember. Focal point allows me to take a deep dive look at the chapter and weigh that against what the students are turning in and see if there's any trends in inconsistencies in the delivery of content in the chapter. I was amazed when I first started doing it. You have a class of 22 students and 9 of them are all not getting the same subtopic. There's something going on there, and I know then when I go into class next, we're going to focus in on that. I get a lot of student engagement and feedback when I ask, what do they need more explanation about? And I feel like they're more apt to write out a question on a focal point worksheet than to raise their hand in class. Because of course it's, nobody wants to look foolish. So one of my more recent examples was social media. This surprised me. Last 2 semesters, we'd get to the chapter on social media, and my students are of the generation that know a whole lot more about social media applications than I do. They've grown up with it, they use it every day, they use it as a communication tool, as well as a social platform. But that's it. They know how to use the application and they don't know why or how it's different. And that's where we can help them understand the depth of use of, what is a social tool versus a communication platform. A social tool, sure, Facebook. The communication platform is the instant messaging. Twitter, yes, you can retweet, it's social. The communication is direct messaging. So helping them understand, and as we're helping them utilize, in this case, social media for business, gives them a clear and broad-based grasp of social media, of communication. And again, it refers back to focal point. That's what kept coming back on my focal point for that chapter, was I know I use social media, but I'm not quite sure about the depth of it. And I was like, wow. We kind of took it for granted that they really did know more than we did in the social media realm. Next slide, please. Okay, and note sharing. Finally, our class scribes. So this is another method that I put into play, and I've had really good results with it. Each week, one student is a scribe. Of course, the first week, nobody wants to volunteer. But then we rotate through it and it's not as bad as it seems, right? And we do just what we did at the top of this session, is one person is appointed the scribe and creates all of those notes. I open up a discussion board on Blackboard and they upload those notes. They have 48 hours to get them up there. This allows a couple of different things. Any students that were absent from class can refer to the notes from the scribe and reach out to that scribe and have conversation. And any other students that may have additional points to, hey, you missed this, or don't forget that, and hey, what about this? They can add to that discussion board as well. But it allows a good, thorough takeaway in their mind, not just my delivery, of what was important during class. And even if there is information that I'm bringing in from experience that of course wouldn't be in the text, I would say something like, now here's the Susan experience. And you might want to know this. It's a tip or technique that you learn along the way from your experience in the world. And you might want to add that to your scribe notes this week, because it's important. Yes, ma'am?
How do they upload it to?
In the discussion board.
How do they upload notes?
Oh, like in a Word document.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then do they have to send it to you and you upload it?
No, it goes right into, it's theirs. They're the class scribe. They take ownership of having, and I'll tell you what, after.
Discussion boards, right?
Oh, okay.
So they can upload it.
We'll be happy, I'll be happy to show you.
They
And
upload a Word document.
yes, yes.
Susan, I suspect that some class scribes will be certainly more skilled than others.
Mm-hmm.
And that students would appreciate it when, like, Katie is the class scribe versus when I am the class scribe, as an example.
Why are you picking on me?
Because I know your name. I know your name. And also I know you take great notes, but, to be sure, but I'm wondering is, as long as Katie's in class all the time, could she be the class scribe on a regular basis?
Great
Katie
question.
was okay with it, and there's
Right.
people go, but I appreciate that, knowing, oh golly, he missed half the notes versus.
That's a great question and very valid point. What I like to do is share the love in the class with the idea of the class scribe, because just to your point, not everybody's a great writer, and we need to help those students get up to being a good writer. They don't have to be great, but that's where that interactivity from other, the peer comments and, hey, did you forget this point? Or don't forget to add that, so that they can learn what it means to be a good scribe, how to be an effective listener, how to be a good note taker, and then taking that content and putting it into sentence structure form so that somebody else can read it, digest it, understand it. So I've had people that are like, oh, Ms. Lacotte, I really don't want to do this. And it's like, it'll be fine. And I always say, you know, there's no wrong answer. They're not all going to be great writers, no doubt, but we will help them. Yes?
Do you give any kind of points or grades for this?
For the scribe, it's part of their in-class. So they earn points for attending, but it is part of their participation. And they can't opt out. It's not an option. So, but it's not a bad thing. That nobody has complained about it. Once they got into that groove. Yes, sir.
Do you see any increased absenteeism knowing that there's a scribe that's going to provide them notes?
Not at all. Not at all. And I think part of that is the way you approach it and to make it fun. But before we even do that on day one, we do a personal SWOT analysis. So I'm like, what is your strength? What is your weakness? What is your opportunity? What is your threat? And when I see one that says, I'm a great writer, it's like, okay, who wants to be first? Bob, you're a good writer. You know, so then you can kind of get somebody to lead the charge on it. But it's never been a problem. Yes?
So I got another question for you.
Okay.
For those of us that maybe are doing the sciences and maths, writing it in Word would be a difficult proposition. And then we also have the accessibility issue. So how do you get around that?
So writing in a Word document?
No. I mean, I'm not going to have a student type in the Word document and do all this math stuff.
Oh, okay. Whatever application, like what application would you do? Would it be a longhand thing or just on a sheet of paper? Yeah, whatever works. And then you can just upload it. They can take a picture of that and, you know, scan it in. So each class would be different, definitely. Next slide. Okay, thank you.
Question, actually.
Yes.
So I've had students who cannot take notes in class because they have such serious strand of same thing, learning processing issues, and so they have a scribe already. So do you just skip students that are in that boat, or I've had it multiple times.
Where they're...
They actually have a note taker in class.
okay.
Because they have some sort of information processing issue
Sure.
where they can't take notes themselves.
Yeah, and that would be a case by case. You know, no two classes are alike. And you really have to gauge, you know, where that particular student is. I mean, for the most of them, yours being the exception there, they would all be pretty apt. What's that?
Do you have a backup scribe in case the regular scribe doesn't show up?
No, I've really not had that problem. But the class begins to rely on each other, and that's what's neat. So if somebody that was supposed to be the scribe didn't show up, I sense it would not be an issue getting another one. So, and then you as the instructor can go, Katie, you're the scribe. You know, just like how you got nominated, right? Right. But I mean, you're driving the ship, and it's for their education, their outcome. I mean, they're lecturing. You want them to be engaged. You want them to understand the content. You want them to know not just on the surface of what it is, but why the content is what it is and what the highlights are. So as we start to wrap up, we're going to group up again, and we're going to compare note-taker notes with the class scribe notes and the highlight scribe notes. So let's start with highlight scribe. Where's my highlight scribe? All right. Do you mind coming a little more front and center so everybody can hear you? All right, so as you're reading these, just kind of look over your notes, all you note takers. And it was Barry, right?
Jason.
Jason, where did I get Barry?
I introduced myself as Barry because I didn't want to take the notes. Sorry.
A true student, spoken like a true student. All right, so as Jason Barry, we'll call you, shares his highlighted notes. Take a look at your own notes and see if you have heard the same content that he has.
So, reasons will include sharing in peer note-taking, increased success, increased student engagement. When to do peer note-taking, when students don't ask questions, when they don't understand, and when they don't perform well. How, handwritten is preferred versus laptop. And methods include, one is pause procedure, where the instructor pauses to let the students discuss and take notes. 2, focal point, including a weekly worksheet. 3, class scribe, or the scribe rotates between.
How'd we do? Yeah? Similar notes? Fantastic. All right. And then our scribe, our main scribe here. Yes. And you don't have to read the whole session back.
Thank you. It's right. I'm just going to upload it.
Very
to
good.
Blackboard.
See, that's all. So you have to scan it in.
I'm just going to scan it in. We got all the slides.
So
we
you
got all
have
the
a little more
highlights.
content
Oh, yeah.
than what Jason did.
Yeah, he did the highlights.
He did the
He
highlights.
did a good job of
And you
highlights.
give us an example of some of the details that you added.
Under sharing notes, I wrote down the name of the book, The Essential Guide to Becoming a Master's Student by Dave Ellis. And then I wrote down your 6 points. Contact other students, encourage students to start early, for note-taking, tips to share with students, compare notes, take a mock test, practice teaching, blah, 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 blah.
Fantastic. That's the point of the scribe. That's the point of the highlight scribe. And you all as note takers, I hope you were spot on. And I hope during that update notes time that you all were able to share some information with each other and be able to extract a few points from one another. Are there any other questions as we wrap up here? Yes, ma'am.
But okay, when it comes to, I guess, maybe materials that's more technical, whether it be a science or a math, how do you handle if students unfortunately just go wrong concepts, wrong everything?
On their note taking?
And the note that they put in the discussion board, no, these are all wrong.
And that's where the update notes throughout the class time comes in handy. Because if during those 2 to 3 minutes, Bob is way off base, and the other 2 or 3 students in that group are like, you know what, I think it's more like, that's where that collaborative learning comes into play. So it's so important to take that 2 or 3 minutes during class time to ensure that, you can keep your scribe on the right page. You can ensure that as a small group learning environment, they're all sharing the content and the ideas and of course, information.
And I'm thinking when you post it on discussion board, though, so it's all wrong. I'm assuming you step in and say like.
I don't think wrong would be the word, because again, everybody's receiving information differently.
Yes.
So, but again, I go back to it's so important during class time to do the update notes so that they can see, because it's going to be one of, ideally it's 4 students, depending on how big your class is. But, if you have 4 students sharing notes during that twice at least during a class time, I think it'll guide them onto the right, the right track. So, any other questions? No? Well, I thank you so much. I appreciate your participation and enjoy your next session.